The first needle-sharp taunt pierced Yuri Garrison's skin during orientation at Galactic Unity Academy. Literally. "Careful with the human," snickered Thex, a towering Velosian with mottled blue skin and 4 eyes that blinked in amused sequence. The tip of his extendable digit had barely brushed against Yuri's arm, yet a small bead of blood had formed instantly. "I forgot how pathetically fragile they are." Yuri dabbed at the tiny wound with his sleeve, keeping his expression neutral despite the burning embarrassment rising to his cheeks. Being the only human in the prestigious Interspecies Academy was already isolating. Becoming known as the delicate creature that bleeds when touched would make it unbearable. "I'm fine," he said, forcing a smile. "Our skin might be thinner than yours, but we compensate in other ways." "Like what?" challenged Zarya, a serpentine krell whose scales gleamed iridescent under the Academy's artificial lighting. "Your species can barely survive basic atmospheric variations without assistance. What exactly makes you qualified to be here?" It was a fair question. The Galactic Unity Academy represented the pinnacle of interstellar education, accepting only the most exceptional students from across the known universe. Most beings here possessed natural armor, enhanced strength, or specialized biological adaptations that made Yuri's human physiology seem hopelessly primitive by comparison. "I guess we'll all find out," Yuri replied, turning away before they could see the doubt in his eyes. The dormitory assigned to Yuri was a stark cube designed with minimal accommodation for his peculiar human needs. The atmospheric regulator hummed quietly, maintaining the precise oxygen-nitrogen blend his lungs required. His 3 roommates, Krell, Velosian, and Mortic, had their own specialized environmental sections, yet all could comfortably visit the common area where Yuri now unpacked his meager belongings. "That's your protection gear?" asked Vex, the Mortic student whose translucent exoskeleton revealed shadowy internal organs pulsing beneath. "It seems inadequate." Yuri looked down at the standard-issue environmental suit all students were required to own. "It meets regulations." "For simulations, maybe," said Thex, who had unfortunately turned out to be one of his roommates. "But field exercises. The first temperature spike would cook you like, what's that Earth food? The flat morning protein disc?" "Pancake," Yuri supplied, trying to ignore the knot forming in his stomach. "Yes, you would be a pancake." And the laughter that followed made Yuri's jaw clench. He'd known coming to the academy would be challenging. As the first human ever admitted, he carried the expectations of his entire species. Humanity was still proving itself worthy of full galactic citizenship, their recent inclusion in interstellar affairs viewed skeptically by older civilizations. "Your species is so bizarre," continued Zarya, who lived across the hall and seemed to have appointed herself his chief tormentor. She stretched her serpentine neck to examine his belongings. "You keep your internal organs protected by nothing more than this thin layer." She prodded his abdomen with a talon that he quickly sidestepped. "We prefer not to poke each other," Yuri said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "Sensitivity in both dermis and temperament," observed Vex clinically. "Fascinating evolutionary choice." The next morning, Yuri arrived early for his first class, Advanced Xenophysiology. Professor Kaltor, a massive 8-limbed Drozerin, regarded him with compound eyes that seemed to dissect him visually. "Ah, our human specimen has arrived," Kaltor announced to the filling classroom. "Today's discussion on biological vulnerabilities becomes remarkably convenient." The class tittered. Yuri took a seat at an empty workstation, painfully aware of the empty buffer zone surrounding him. "Humans," Kaltor continued, activating a holographic display, "represent an unusual developmental path. While most spacefaring species evolved robust external protection, he gestured toward the various scales, plates, and exoskeletons visible throughout the room. Humans opted for increased neural complexity at the expense of physical durability. The display showed a cross-section of human skin beside comparable samples from other species. The contrast was humiliating. Next to the armored hides and reinforced integuments of his classmates, human skin appeared absurdly vulnerable. "Sir," Yuri raised his hand, "while our dermal layer may be thinner, human skin actually contains remarkable healing properties and sensory perception that—" "Yes, yes," interrupted Coulter dismissively. "Compensatory adaptations. However, the practical applications remain limited. For instance, Mr. Garrison, could you withstand direct contact with Pyrrhosian magma?" "No, sir." "Caustic Jovian atmosphere?" "No, sir." "Perhaps even moderate radiation exposure?" Yuri swallowed. "Not without protection, sir." "Precisely my point. In practical applications, these limitations present significant challenges for interspecies operations." After class, Yuri hurried down the corridor, hoping to reach his next session without further interaction. No such luck. "Hey, tissue skin!" Thex called, flanked by several other students. "We're forming study groups for survival training. Want to join us?" His 4 eyes blinked in mocking sequence. "I already have arrangements," Yuri lied, quickening his pace. "Good call," said a Pyrovan student with skin like burnished copper. "He'd probably start leaking bodily fluids if we discussed anything too intense." Their laughter followed him down the corridor. 2 weeks into the semester, the Academy began practical training exercises. The first, atmospheric adaptation in varied environments. Students were required to navigate a series of chambers with rapidly changing conditions, temperature fluctuations, pressure variance, atmospheric composition shifts. Yuri suited up in his environmental gear, aware of the skeptical glances from his classmates. Many of them required minimal protection, their evolutionary adaptations sufficient for most conditions they'd encounter. "Remember," instructed Commander Lev, a grizzled Tellurian veteran, "this exercise tests both your physical capabilities and decision-making under stress. Each environment presents challenges that may be fatal to some species, but trivial to others. Your task is to identify threats, adapt accordingly, and reach the extraction point." The first chamber simulated a nitrogen-heavy atmosphere with freezing temperatures. Yuri's suit compensated adequately, though its joints stiffened uncomfortably. Around him, his classmates handled the conditions with varying degrees of ease. The Pyrovan student, Drek, seemed practically energized by the cold. Chamber 2 brought sulfuric acid rain. Yuri's suit integrity alarms flashed warnings as droplets began eroding his outer protective layer. He quickened his pace, noting with frustration how Zarya and several others moved through the downpour unaffected, their natural defenses repelling the caustic precipitation. By Chamber 3, a heat-intensive environment simulating the outer layers of a gas giant, Yuri's suit was struggling. Warning indicators flashed across his head's up display as internal temperatures rose. Sweat poured down his face, blurring his vision. "Looks like the human's cooking," observed Thex loudly as he passed Yuri with ease. His Velosian physiology adapted to far more extreme heat ranges. Yuri gritted his teeth and pushed forward. Just as he reached the chamber exit, a sudden pressure surge caused a seal rupture in his left glove. Searing pain shot up his arm as superheated air made contact with his exposed skin. He stumbled through the door, clutching his injured hand against his chest, the blistering already visible. In the recovery area, medical staff quickly attended to his burn while other students watched with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. "First casualty of the season," remarked Zarya. "Betting pool was 3 chambers. I had him failing in 2. "You were betting on when I'd get hurt?" Yuri asked, wincing as regenerative foam was applied to his scalded flesh. "On when you'd fail," corrected Thex. "Though with humans, same difference." That night, nursing his bandaged hand, Yuri considered requesting transfer back to Earth. The Academy clearly wasn't designed for human physiology, and the constant reminders of his biological inferiority were wearing him down. He composed a message to his advisor, but hesitated before sending it. His terminal chimed with an incoming communication, his sister Yelena back on Earth. "How's space school, little brother?" she asked, her smile fading as she noticed his bandaged hand. "What happened?" "Training accident. It's nothing." "Doesn't look like nothing." Her eyes narrowed. "Are they being cruel to you up there?" Yuri considered lying, but couldn't. "They think I'm fragile, a biological curiosity that doesn't belong." "And what do you think?" He paused. "Sometimes I wonder if they're right. Humans aren't built for this. We're too what? Too determined? Too adaptable? Too stubborn?" Yelena leaned closer to the screen. "Remember great-grandfather's stories about the first Mars colonies? They said humans couldn't survive there either. This is different. It's exactly the same. They underestimate what we can endure." She tapped her temple. "Our strength isn't in our skin, Yuri. It never was." After disconnecting, Yuri deleted his transfer request draft and instead pulled up the Academy's training schedules. If he couldn't match their natural abilities, he'd have to find another approach. For the next 2 weeks, Yuri spent every free hour in the simulation chambers, running scenarios at increasing difficulty levels. His burn healed slowly human regeneration being yet another biological process his classmates found amusingly inefficient, but he pushed through the discomfort. He studied the physiological profiles of each species represented at the Academy, identifying their strengths and their hidden vulnerabilities. Velosians like Thex, despite their heat resistance, had poor visual processing in certain light spectrums. Krells like Zarya, for all their armor, had hypersensitive auditory receptors that could be overwhelmed. Most importantly, he reviewed every piece of equipment available to students, focusing on adaptations and modifications that could compensate for human limitations. The second major training exercise was announced: Wilderness Survival on Proxima 4, a training moon with diverse and challenging biomes. Students would be dropped in teams of 4 and required to navigate to extraction points across hazardous terrain. Yuri was unsurprised to find himself grouped with Thex, Zarya, and Vex, the Academy's way of balancing teams by putting the perceived weakest member with stronger counterparts. "Try not to die immediately," advised Thex during preparation. "At least give us a chance to reach the first checkpoint before we have to start carrying your remains." "Your concern is touching," replied Yuri, methodically checking his modified equipment. He had reinforced his environmental suit with additional layers and integrated several customized features based on his research. The dropship deposited them in a volcanic region of Proxima 4, where rivers of molten rock cut through jagged black stone. Heat shimmers distorted the horizon, and toxic gases periodically vented from fissures in the ground. "This environment favors Pirovan physiology," observed Vex, scanning their surroundings. "For the rest of us, especially the human, caution is advised." "First checkpoint is 3 kilometers northeast," said Zarya, consulting her nav system, "through that lava field." The field in question was a nightmarish landscape of active flows and unstable rock formations. Even with protective gear, crossing it would be treacherous for most species. "We should skirt around," suggested Thax. "Longer route, but safer." "That would add hours," countered Zarya. "The direct path is faster." "For some of us," Thex's 4 eyes blinked toward Yuri, "others won't survive the crossing." "We go together or not at all," said Vex pragmatically. "Academy protocols are clear." "I can make it across," Yuri stated quietly. All 3 turned to stare at him. "Your suit would fail within minutes," scoffed Zarya. "The radiant heat alone would—" "I've made modifications." Yuri activated his suit's enhanced cooling system. A soft hum emanated from the power unit on his back. "And I've studied this terrain type. The crust formations can support my weight if I move quickly enough." "Theoretical knowledge doesn't," began Thex. Let him try, interrupted Vex, compound eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. Worst outcome, we retrieve what's left of him from the other side. They approached the edge of the lava field. Up close, the heat was overwhelming, distorting the air and making it difficult to breathe even through filtration systems. Pockets of magma bubbled and burst, sending molten droplets flying unpredictably. Yuri took a deep breath and engaged all of his suit's protective measures. The cooling system ramped up, the material stiffened for maximum insulation, and his visor polarized against the blinding glare. "Follow my exact path," he instructed his teammates, surprising them with his authoritative tone. "The crust is thickest where recent flows have cooled. Step only where I step." Before they could object, he stepped onto the blackened surface. His boots immediately registered dangerous temperatures, but the enhanced insulation held. Carefully testing each step, he began making his way across the field, using a scanner to identify the most stable patches. Behind him, his teammates followed warily. Even with their superior natural heat resistance, the environment was challenging for them. Vex especially struggled, his translucent exoskeleton not evolved for such extreme conditions. Halfway across, disaster struck. A section of crust collapsed under Yuri's weight, plunging his right leg knee deep into semi-molten rock. Warning alarms blared inside his helmet as his suit's integrity was compromised. Searing pain shot through his leg even as emergency sealant deployed around the breach. "Garrison is down!" shouted Thex. "Leave him," called Zarya. "We need to keep moving." Yuri gritted his teeth against the agony and heaved himself free, suit material melting and adhering to his burned flesh. His vision swam with pain, but he forced himself to analyze the situation. The suit's primary protection was compromised, but his modifications included redundant systems. "I can continue," he gasped, rerouting power to undamaged sections. The pain was excruciating, but he'd prepared for this possibility. His suit injected targeted pain blockers, enough to function without completely dulling his survival instincts. "That's impossible," stated Vex, scientific certainty in his voice. "Your biological matter was in direct contact with molten substrate." "Yet here I stand," replied Yuri, already limping forward again. "We have a checkpoint to reach." The remainder of the crossing passed in a blur of pain and determination for Yuri. His teammates followed in stunned silence, witnessing what should have been a fatal incident for a human become merely a severe injury that somehow wasn't stopping him. When they finally reached solid ground on the other side, Yuri collapsed, his reserves of strength finally depleted. Thex awkwardly administered emergency medical treatment while Zarya called for extraction. "Why didn't you stop?" asked Vex, hovering nearby. "You could have waited for us to assist." Through a haze of pain, Yuri managed to respond. "The mission comes first. That's what we're here to learn, isn't it?" The Academy Medical Bay was equipped to handle all manner of species, but the staff seemed particularly challenged by Yuri's injuries. The burn covered most of his lower right leg, a horrific mix of third-degree damage that had melted both his suit and skin together in places. "We've stabilized the tissue and administered regenerative compounds," explained Dr. Mira, a Halosian physician with glowing tendrils that served as both medical instruments and sensory organs. "But human healing processes are remarkably slow compared to most species we treat." "How long until I can return to training?" Yuri asked, voice raspy from pain medication. "Return?" Dr. Mira's tendrils pulsed with surprise. "Mr. Garrison, this injury would sideline most beings for at least a recovery cycle. For a human, several weeks minimum." "Unacceptable," he replied, attempting to sit up. "The wilderness training concludes in 10 days with the final assessment. I need to participate." "That would be extremely inadvisable," said another voice. Commander Lev entered the medical bay, his craggy features set in a stern expression. "Your team has been reassigned. You'll be evaluated separately once you've recovered." Sir, with respect. It's not a request, Cadet. Lev moved closer, lowering his voice. What you did out there was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, possibly both. But the Academy isn't in the business of sacrificing students to prove points. After Lev departed, Yuri lay back, frustration burning hotter than his injury. He'd pushed beyond his limits, demonstrated that humans could endure what most thought impossible, and his reward was to be sidelined and separated from his team. To his surprise, visitors arrived that evening. Thex, Zarya, and Vex entered his room awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable in the medical setting. "We brought your personal items," said Vex, placing Yuri's tablet on the bedside table. "And assignment updates," added Thex, avoiding eye contact. "You didn't miss much in xenopolitical theory." Zarya slithered closer, her serpentine eyes studying him intently. "Why did you continue after your suit breached? Any rational being would have called for emergency extraction." Yuri considered the question carefully. "Because you all expected me to fail." "So it was pride?" asked Thex skeptically. "No, it was necessary." Yuri shifted, wincing as pain shot through his leg despite the medication. "You all see humans as physically inferior. Maybe we are, in many ways. But you needed to see that we compensate in other ways. By being recklessly self-destructive?" Zarya's scales rippled with what might have been concern. "By refusing to accept limitations others place on us." Yuri met each of their gazes in turn. "Humans have always pushed boundaries. It's how we survived on Earth and how we'll survive in the galaxy." An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Vex spoke. "The physician says your recovery will take 27 standard cycles. This seems inefficient." "It is," agreed Yuri, "but I'll manage." "We inquired about accelerated options," continued Vex. "There are regenerative treatments available on the Holosian medical station that might reduce your recovery time." Yuri blinked in surprise. "You researched treatments for me?" "We are a team," stated Thex, as if it were obvious. "Your performance affects our evaluation metrics." It wasn't quite concern, but it was something. During his 3-week recovery, Yuri was surprised to find his teammates visiting regularly, bringing assignments and updates from classes. They seemed genuinely curious about human healing processes, watching with scientific interest as his damaged tissue slowly regenerated. "Your pain tolerance is unexpectedly high," observed Vex during one visit. "Most species with your level of neurological complexity would exhibit greater distress signals." "Pain is information," Yuri replied, repeating what his sister had often told him during their childhood on Earth's frontier colonies. "Humans learn to process it differently with experience." "Still," said Thex, watching as Yuri winced through physical therapy exercises, "there is a difference between enduring pain and whatever you're doing." "What am I doing?" "Using it," said Zarya unexpectedly, "like fuel." The day Yuri returned to active training, news had spread throughout the academy about the human who had walked through molten rock and survived. Whispers followed him through corridors, but they were different now, still curious, occasionally skeptical, but tinged with a newfound respect. Commander Lev called him to his office, a sparse space decorated only with artifacts from his long military career. "Your medical clearance came through this morning," Lev said without preamble. "But the final wilderness assessment begins tomorrow. Your team has been training without you." "I'm ready to rejoin them, sir." "Are you?" Lev fixed him with a penetrating stare. "This isn't about proving points anymore, Garrison. The final exercise takes place in the Crimson Canyon system. Environmental hazards include Class 3 radiation fields, temperature extremes, and indigenous predators specifically attracted to mammalian biochemistry." "I've reviewed the briefing materials, sir." "Have you also reviewed your own medical scans?" Lev projected a holographic image of Yuri's leg. The newly healed tissue was clearly visible, pink and vulnerable compared to the surrounding skin. One wrong step, one suit breach, and you won't just suffer burns this time. You could die. With respect, sir, that's true for any cadet. Not equally true, Lev sighed. Most of your classmates have redundant organ systems, protective carapaces, or regenerative abilities that far exceed human capacity. You don't. Which is precisely why I need to participate, Yuri insisted. Humans will always be at a physical disadvantage in many environments. We need to demonstrate that we can compensate through other means. Lev studied him for a long moment. Your species' determination borders on pathological, you know that? It's gotten us this far, sir. Very well. Lev deactivated the hologram. Report to Preparation Base 6 at 500 hours tomorrow. Your team will be notified of your reinstatement. The Crimson Canyon lived up to its name, rust-colored rock formations stretching for kilometers under twin suns that bathed everything in harsh red light. The dropship deposited Yuri's team at the canyon's edge, where gusty winds carried abrasive particles that scratched at their protective gear. The extraction point is 30 kilometers through the canyon system, explained Thex, who had been appointed team leader during Yuri's absence. Multiple hazard zones between here and there. Our first obstacle is the radiation belt 2 kilometers ahead, continued Vex, consulting their mapping system. Standard protection will be insufficient for extended exposure. Zarya turned to Yuri. Your suit modifications, will they help with radiation? Yuri nodded, surprised by her direct question. I've added specialized shielding and installed radiation scrubbers. They'll buy us extra time, but we'll still need to move quickly. Good. Thex pointed toward a narrow path winding down into the canyon. You take point on radiation monitoring. Vex will handle navigation. Zarya and I will watch for predators. The team dynamic had shifted subtly, where once they had viewed Yuri as a liability, now they were integrating his specific knowledge and adaptations into their strategy. The radiation belt manifested as a subtle shimmer in the air, almost beautiful if not for the deadly invisible particles saturating the zone. Yuri's sensors immediately registered dangerous levels. Radiation at 86 millirems and climbing, he reported. Suit integrity holding, but we have approximately 20 minutes before reaching dangerous cumulative exposure. They moved through the zone efficiently, each member watching different threat vectors. When a pack of canyon stalkers, eyeless predators that hunted by sensing body heat, emerged from a side ravine, Zarya and Thex moved in perfect coordination to drive them back, while Yuri and Vex maintained their forward momentum. Halfway through the exercise, they encountered a massive rock slide that blocked their planned route. The detour would take them through what the map showed as a thermal vent field, an area where geothermal activity created unpredictable bursts of superheated steam and gases. This is problematic, stated Vex. The combined heat and chemical composition will degrade our protective gear rapidly. Especially yours, said Thex, looking at Yuri, after your previous incident. Yuri studied the vent field carefully. There's a pattern to the eruptions. Look. He pointed to various vents. They cycle in sequence. If we time our movements correctly, we can minimize exposure. The timing would need to be precise, said Zarya skeptically. One miscalculation. I'll go first, offered Yuri. My suit sensors can map the exact timing and create a safe passage algorithm for the rest of you to follow. That puts you at maximum risk, objected Thax. I've prepared for this, Yuri assured him, activating additional protective layers in his suit. Heat resistance is where I focused most of my modifications after what happened in the lava field. Before they could argue further, he started forward, scanner extended to analyze the thermal patterns. The heat intensified with each step, sweat immediately soaking through his undersuit. The first vent erupted 15 meters to his right, sending a column of steam hissing into the air. Yuri moved methodically, stopping between eruptions, building the predictive model in real time. Behind him, his teammates watched tensely, receiving the data he transmitted and preparing to follow his exact path. Near the center of the field, disaster nearly struck again. A vent beneath Yuri's feet showed signs of imminent eruption that hadn't matched the pattern. He had milliseconds to react, throwing himself sideways just as superheated gas burst from the ground where he'd been standing. The edge of the blast caught his left side, instantly overwhelming his suit's protection in that area. Pain seared through him as the heat penetrated to skin, but the damage was far less severe than it could have been. "Garrison!" shouted Thex. "I'm functional," Yuri replied through gritted teeth, forcing himself to his feet. Pattern adjusted. Follow the new route I'm sending. Step by painful step, he continued through the field, updating the safe path as he identified new variables in the eruption sequence. When he finally reached the other side, his teammates followed the mapped route perfectly, arriving unscathed. "Your left side requires treatment," stated Vex, examining the damaged section of Yuri's suit. "Later," said Yuri, applying a temporary sealant. "We need to reach the extraction point before sunset." The final challenge came at a narrow bridge spanning a deep chasm. The natural rock formation was unstable, deteriorating from the constant wind erosion. Crossing it would be dangerous for any of them, but especially for Yuri, whose injuries had weakened him considerably. "I'll test its stability," volunteered Thex, whose Velocian physiology included enhanced balance adaptations. "Wait," said Yuri, scanning the structure. "The integrity is compromised in multiple sections. It won't hold any of us for more than a few seconds." "Then we're trapped," said Zarya. "The nearest alternative crossing is 8 kilometers away. We'd miss extraction." "Not necessarily." Yuri examined their remaining equipment. "We can use the emergency cables to create a zipline system. The anchoring points on either side appear solid." Working together, they constructed an improvised transport system. Vex's precise calculations determined the optimal angle and tension, while Zarya's strength allowed for secure anchoring. Thex, with his 4 arms, managed the complicated knot work required. Yuri went last, his injured body protesting as he clipped onto the line and pushed off from the edge. Halfway across, one of the anchors began to give way, causing the line to sag dangerously. His momentum slowed, leaving him suspended above the chasm as the cable continued to slip. "The anchor is failing," called Zarya from the far side. Yuri assessed his options with remarkable clarity, despite the fear coursing through him. Hanging there, injured and exhausted, he made a decision. He began swinging his body, building momentum like a pendulum. "What are you doing?" demanded Thex. "Creating enough swing to reach the edge when the line drops," Yuri explained between labored breaths. "Be ready to grab me." The anchor gave way completely, just as Yuri reached the apex of his swing toward the canyon edge. For a heart-stopping moment, he was in free fall. Then his outstretched hands found purchase on the rocky ledge. Thex and Zarya immediately reached down, seizing his arms and hauling him to safety. They reached the extraction point as the twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. The transport vessel was waiting, Commander Lev standing at the ramp with an unreadable expression. "Cutting it close, cadets," he remarked as they approached, his gaze lingering on Yuri's battered condition. "We encountered several unexpected obstacles, sir," reported Thex formally, "and yet you're all here." Lev nodded with what might have been approval. "Medical will want to see you immediately, Garrison." "Yes, sir." Yuri managed to stand at attention despite his injuries, refusing to show weakness now, at the end. "The rest of you, standard debrief in 1 hour." As they boarded the transport, Vex approached Yuri. "Your performance was illuminating." "How so?" "I've been cataloging biological adaptations across species for many cycles. Your species lacks obvious defensive or offensive capabilities, yet demonstrates remarkable problem-solving under duress." Vex's translucent features rippled with what might have been admiration. It is an adaptation I had undervalued. Back at the academy, Yuri spent another 3 days in the medical bay. This time, however, his teammates visited frequently, bringing not just assignments but questions, genuine curiosity about human perspectives on various topics they studied. On his release day, he found Thex waiting outside the medical bay. "The class rankings were posted this morning," said the Velocian without preamble. "And," asked Yuri, bracing for disappointment, "our team placed first in the survival exercise. Commander Lev cited our exceptional adaptation to unforeseen challenges and effective utilization of diverse capabilities." Yuri blinked in surprise. "That's unexpected." "Not entirely." Thex's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, but without the mocking pattern of before. "You showed us something important, Garrison. Physiological advantages are significant, but they can create complacency. Your species constantly compensates for its limitations through innovation and determination." As they walked toward the Academy's central atrium, Yuri noticed a change in how others regarded him. The whispers and stares continued, but they carried a different quality now: curiosity rather than derision, respect rather than pity. In the large gathering space, a group of students from various species had assembled for what appeared to be an impromptu ceremony. Zarya slithered forward as Yuri approached. "We have a tradition," she explained. "When a teammate demonstrates exceptional courage, we acknowledge it formally." Vex stepped forward, holding a small metallic emblem. "This is a survivor's mark. It is rarely awarded to first-year cadets." "I don't understand," said Yuri, genuinely confused. "Your thin skin," said Thex, uncharacteristically solemn, "is not the weakness we believed it to be. It is simply a different kind of strength, one that requires greater awareness, greater innovation, and greater courage." Drek, the Pirovan student who had once mocked Yuri's vulnerability to heat, stepped forward. "We have a saying on Perova: the hottest flame forges the strongest metal. You walked through fire that would have deterred many of us, not because you could withstand it, but because you refused to accept that you couldn't." As Vex pinned the emblem to Yuri's uniform, applause broke out among the gathered students. It wasn't universal; some still watched with skepticism, but it was a beginning. "Thank you," said Yuri, genuinely moved. "But this isn't just about me. Humans aren't exceptional because we're fearless or invulnerable. We're not. We feel every injury, every burn, every radiation exposure just as acutely as anyone. Maybe more so." He looked around at the diverse faces watching him. "What makes us resilient is that we keep going anyway, and we adapt, and we're not alone in that. Every species here has survived challenges that should have been impossible." Later that evening, Yuri contacted his sister to share the news. "I knew you'd show them," said Yelena, her proud smile filling the screen. "It wasn't about proving anything in the end," replied Yuri thoughtfully. "It was about learning from each other. They underestimated what humans can endure, but I underestimated how much they could change their perceptions." "So you're staying?" Yuri glanced at his survivor's mark, then at the study materials spread across his desk, preparations for next semester's even more challenging courses. "Definitely. This is just the beginning." As the Academy's first term came to a close, Yuri Garrison had established more than just his own place among the stars. He had demonstrated that humanity's apparent weakness, their vulnerability, their thin skin, concealed a different kind of strength, the ability to face impossible odds and find a way forward. It wasn't despite their limitations that humans would make their mark on the galaxy, but because of how they responded to them. The next time Yuri walked through fire, he wouldn't be walking alone.